All right, just checking all my meeting stats are okay. Yeah, we'll get started in about 3-4 minutes, I guess. Good morning, everybody. Okay, it's 7:56. We'll start in 5 minutes. All right, starting in 3 minutes. All right, let's get started now. All right, guys, let's get started. Welcome. My name is Peter Sigurdsson. We're here to learn about Windows Server, and we might work some stuff on Linux Server or other operating systems into it. More generally, this is going to be a course on operating systems, which might sound kind of boring, but actually it's the segue. It's the lead into a lot of very well-paying job opportunities. So I hope you guys will enjoy this course. I hope you'll take it seriously, because computers run the world, right? We say that we're living in the algorithm economy. So computers control everything from traffic lights to home appliances and finances and 9/11 call centers and everything in between. And I'm assuming everybody is here because you would like to get the well-paying job, right? A job with high status and good growth opportunities in the future. And the kinds of basic foundational IT skills we're going to learn here definitely will be your lead into doing that. So our game plan today is we're going to spend the first hour looking at the course outline, seeing some of the kinds of assignments we're going to be doing and what the tests are and what kind of questions we're going to be dealing with on the tests. But first of all, I'd like to start with a little attendance quiz to just verify who's here. So don't be stressed about this. Just do your best. This does not count to your mark. However, attendance is very important, right? I will pass. I will even give a good final mark to students who are showing they're taking the class seriously and their attendance is pretty strong. But if somebody is not having attendance, well, that's not really too good. All right, so anyway, the link is there in your chat comments. So go and click on that now and spend a couple minutes working on that, and then we will carry on. Nobody is writing my quiz. Just click on the link and write the quiz. It's not going to hurt you. I promise it's a nice quiz. You should now be seeing my screen that says class marker F22 IN2054 Windows Server. That's and by the way, this tool is the tool we will be using for our final exam and for our real tests. And this are some of the questions you're going to actually get on the final exam. So it's probably not a bad idea to start paying attention to them from now. Guys, why is nobody writing my quiz? This is bothering me. Write my quiz. Click on the link and write it. Because this does count for attendance, right? So if nobody writes it, then I assume maybe you just clicked on the link, but you went back to bed. You're not really here. You should see a URL link in the chat box. Click on the link and write the quiz. You're being difficult. Hello, can you hear me? Why is nobody writing my quiz?
Hello.
This is not getting off to a good start.
Excuse me, sir.
Hello, yep.
So actually we are clicking on the link, but it is not opening. I'm not able to open. I don't know why.
What browser? It will not work in Internet Explorer. Do you have Chrome? You must use Chrome web browser or maybe Firefox, but
Okay.
Internet Explorer, no. Internet Explorer does not work. It's a stupid browser. I apologize if anybody has relatives working for Microsoft. They do many things well, but not browsers. Really, you can't open it. All right, let's go and look at the settings here. Well, it's available, so I don't know. Let me try it myself. So watch here on my screen. I'm going to copy it. And by the way, I can tell you from now, this is a technically demanding course. So if you can't get a URL to open, there's probably not a big chance you're going to pass the course. I mean, I don't mean to disappoint you, but we can only baby things down so much, right? So I selected the URL, I copied it, I pasted it into the address line of my browser, and it is working for me, right? So if it's working for me, now I can put all my information in here, name and email address and all that, and then I can proceed. So seriously, if you guys are not able to open a link in a browser, I'm honestly not holding out much hope for this class. It really doesn't get any simpler than this. All right, so guys, let's do this. First of all, let's make sure that you can actually see my screen. Can anybody see what I'm typing on the screen?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so it says say or type. Yeah, so if I give you a direction to do something, it will make the class work much better if you actually do it. All right, so you can see the screen because I have 3 monitors in front of me right now, and I've just updated to a new version of Zoom, so not totally sure how Zoom is handling multiple monitors. Anyway, so now the next thing is if we go here, so maybe I'll put this URL. Maybe you're having a problem with the chat box because I've been using this tool for the past 8 years. I've never had any problems with it. So I'm going to go here to Classroom, Google Classroom. Whoops. All right, guys, let's really concentrate on this now, because if you cannot use Class Marker, that means you will not be able to write any of the tests, and that means you're going to fail the course. I mean, I'm sorry to be harsh about it, but that's as simple as it is. So I'm going to go here now to our Google Classroom for the class, and I'll put a, maybe you weren't seeing the link in the chat box. That's the only thing I can think. So link for day 1 attendance quiz. So I'm also going to make a link here. And also, these are going to be the same questions you will be asked about on the final exam. So I'm assuming you would probably be interested to see those questions. I mean, I'm guessing you probably kind of want to pass the course. If you don't want to pass the course, well, that would kind of mess up my thinking because usually students are kind of intentional to pass the course. All right, so let's post this. So now, guys, let's all and ladies, let's all concentrate on this really hard. There is a link here in your Google Classroom. So copy the link, drag over it, right click and say copy, and then go to your Chrome or Firefox browser, not Internet Explorer, right click and say paste and enter. And you should now be seeing the screen. So let me go through back to my own class marker and see if anybody is able to get in. And if they can't, then we're going to default back. I mean, I can spend 3 hours reading the PowerPoints to you, but once again, if you won't be able to write the final exam, it's kind of what's the point? At this point, I would suggest if you cannot get into this test, send an email to Student Services. And I'm not sure what the cancellation policy is. See if it's still time for you to cancel out of the course and maybe get some of your money back. Oh, good. So now I have 5 people who are able to get into it. I don't know what the issue was before, but anyway, I'm going to go and heat up my coffee. I'll be back in a couple of minutes, and then hopefully everybody will be finished. We will review this together, and then we'll look at the course outline. All right, let's see how folks are doing here. Well, I'm up to 24 people. That's pretty good. I think that's most of our class members. All right, I'll wait till folks are finished. Then we will go through the questions together, and then we will look at the course outline. Now, again, bear in mind, these are going to be extremely similar to your final exam. So come final exam, you're going to ask me what will be the questions and what will be the kind of test tool and what will be the kind of questions. Well, everything you're seeing now is what it's going to be. Wow, I'm up to 29 people. Good. A couple of people are finished. All right, you ones that are finished, just hang around for a couple of minutes till your classmates catch up, and then we will carry on. All right, it seems most people are finished. We have a couple of late starters who are still going, but we don't want to lose too much time because we have a lot to do here. So let's just grab somebody's work at random and take a look through it. So on a particular server, now one of the topics we're going to be talking about in our course right now is virtual machines. In fact, well, you probably have no concept what a virtual machine is. That's what you're here to learn about. But something that I figured was very effective when I taught this course last time was to make a little roadmap, right? Was to make a graphical chart and picture of how the concepts tie together. Because normally when you go to school, you just get a list of concepts, right? It's sort of like words in a book, which is good because it's detail oriented, but it doesn't really help you make connections between things. So therefore, we're going to be making a kind of a visual chart, and we're going to put all of our concepts on this chart. And then at the end, you'll have that as a takeaway after the course, as well as you'll have something to study for. So because this is kind of our first main concept, virtual machine, I'm going to start doing that right now, and we're going to build it up, and we're going to make it part of our practice of every class during the lecture of the labs. We're going to add things to it, and we're going to put them all together. So I'm going to use a tool called Visio to do this. I used to do this on paper and just draw things out, and then I would point my desk cam, which I'm projecting onto the screen right now. The problem is the papers got messy and they got messed up and they were hard to add to. So now I'm using Visio, which seems to work much better. All right, at any point, if there are any questions, just type your questions into the chat or just ask your questions by talking. You all have the mic open, and then I'll try and do my best to address that. All right, so for right now, let's make our...
All right, so for right now, let's make our...
Guys, I'm getting some feedback. So I guess I have to turn the mics off. Just a sec now. All right, because I was somebody I think had their speaker open on their laptop, and they also had their mic open, unmuted on their laptop, so it was feeding back, and it was very unpleasant for me to listen to. So I've muted everybody, but if you want to ask a question by talking, then just type in the chat comments, say, can I have the mic, and I'll unmute you. Anyway, let's carry on for right now with our Visio project. All right, so we're going to say now make a new blank drawing. Now, for right now, because it's the first hour of the first class, and I want to give us an overview before we get too much into it, I'm not going to go deeply into any of these things because we have entire lectures for every single one of them. But for right now, I'm just going to drop the concept of virtual machine, and then we'll go and add on to it as we get more information to talk about for it. Now, to explain what a virtual machine is, I have to talk a little bit about what an operating system is in general, and we're going to get to that within the next hour. But for right now, we just want to capture that there is something called a virtual machine. Sharing has stopped because the external display was disconnected. Okay. Yeah, I had to do something to fix myself up here. Something was messed up. Hang on, guys. I'll be back with you in a second. All right, that should be okay. I think everything is back in place now. All right, now we can keep going. So essentially, a virtual machine is like a little software version rendition of a big computer. You probably don't really have a way to relate to what that is right now, but once we get into our course outline, we're going to talk about that. So the correct answer is you can run any version of Windows without regard for versions running in other virtual machines, and the virtual machine consumes resources from the host system. Well, maybe we can spend a couple of minutes talking about it now, just so we can sort of start getting into our course material. So let me get my desk cam up and going here. All right. So normally if we were in classroom, I'd be drawing on the whiteboard. Here in a virtual class, the best I can do is to kind of draw on a paper and show it over the camera. So let's do that. So our courses we've already seen is about Windows Server, and you may hear me referring to the course as operating systems because Windows Server is one kind of operating system. There's others such as Linux and Macintosh and I don't know, a few other ones. But in general, this is a course about operating systems. And the specific operating system that we're going to talk about is Windows. So that means we now have to start factoring into account some basic things to think about here, such as what is an operating system? What does it do? Why do we need it? How does it work? And all of this stuff is in your slides, your PowerPoints that I'm going to kick out as well. But let's just start by getting a little bit of a sort of a fingertip feel of it before we go into the details. So in front of every one of you right now is a computer, and the lowest level of stuff on the computer is hardware. So what kinds of important things do we need in computer hardware? Well, the CPU, which is the central processing unit, which is the computational engine, this takes instructions and it executes the instructions to process information. Right? I know it, depending, you might not have been exposed to these concepts before, and some of these things might seem very confusing, but we have nice PowerPoints and some videos I'm going to send out. And if you just keep showing up in class and paying attention, soon these things will be very familiar to you. So in addition to needing a CPU, the other thing we need is memory. Sometimes they call that RAM memory or core memory. So that's what actually stores the information that's manipulated by the CPU. The other thing we might need are what are called peripherals. So the word peripheral means outside. So a printer or a screen or a keyboard or a USB key or a network interface card are all peripherals. And that's how we get I/O information in and out. Now, the other thing an operating system and a computer in general would need to have is a file system. So you have your hard drive and you have files and directories, and you store information persistently here. So you can store information between runs of the program. So that is all the stuff which is in a computer, and the purpose of the operating system it could also be Linux or Mac or AS400 or OS390 or PDP-11, right? There's a couple of dozen kinds of operating systems in the world. So the purpose of an operating system is to control and manage all this stuff. So all of our computer resources need to be controlled, managed, secured, right? We have to have security so hackers don't get in there and steal our information. Right? Needs to be operated. So the hard drive needs to be operated so we can access the files. So the purpose of an operating system is to do all of these tasks. To operate, to control, to manage, and to secure all of the computer resources. I'm going to get some other colors of pen here. Where did I put my pens? My daughter just went back to university. She stole all my cool pens. That's okay. I like her to have them. Let's see if this pen has any ink left in it. Oh yeah, there it has a little bit of ink left. So our computer resources are here. And these are the tasks. These are the things that we do on those resources. And these are all the things that operating system does. Now, there's one other thing operating system needs to manage besides managing the computer resources. The other thing it needs to manage is the users. So Windows is pretty much a single user computer system. Other systems like AS400 or OS390 could have many users using them at the same time, maybe hundreds of users. So we need to create what are called user accounts. And we need to have policy documents for each account. And I'll talk more about that later. And we generally put our users into groups. So we might have the admin group and the marketing group and the finance group and the executive group and so on. So therefore, we can apply policy documents to groups. We can put users into groups. And in that way, we can connect, we can allow or deny users access to resources. Now, everything I've said here is what an operating system does. Right? Most of our course is on that paper in front of you right now. And in a couple of minutes, I'm going to scan this paper and put it up in our PowerPoint. Even though you're going to see it before, like I have many, you've been using the PowerPoint as a whiteboard during the online, everybody taking their course from home type of thing. So you're going to see lots of duplication, but it's all basically the same thing. Now, our question here is about virtual machines. And you can understand from this diagram that computer always starts with hardware. And on top of hardware, we have an operating system. And on top of operating system, we have application programs. So the lowest level of our information processing stack is computer hardware, CPU and RAM memory and peripherals, file system, and on top of the hardware, we have something called an operating system. So when you first turn on your computer in the morning, the operating system, Windows or Linux, loads up. So we have, in this case, our Windows operating system. What does the operating system do? Well, all the stuff we just talked about here. It controls, secures, manages, and operates access to the hardware. It allows or denies users based on their security policy, access to the hard drive or to the printer or to the network connection or so on. Right, so we have network interface adapter, for example, or USB, if you stick a USB memory key into the computer. Right, my wife works for the Bank of Montreal, and her work laptop, if she tries to stick a USB memory thumb drive into it, it will not recognize it because it's very secure, the bank information. So they have a policy that if a user tries to insert a peripheral, a USB memory device, it will just be locked out. It will not be accessed because they don't want anybody to be able to go and grab that information and I don't know, take it away or something. So the basic operation of any computer is we have computer hardware, operating system. Now on top of operating system, we have application software. Right, we have application programs. And application programs live and they run and they exist in the operating system. And the operating system then, on behalf, let's say you have Microsoft Word, you're typing your resume. That program through the operating system will then go down to the computer hardware. It'll run the CPU. It'll store on the hard drive. It'll go out to the internet and return some information. And then you can copy and paste it back into your Word document in Word. So here, operating or application programs could be things like Word, Excel, PowerPoint, games, whatever you do on the computer. Web browser is an application program. Now, virtual machines are little operating systems. And we're going to find out that in terms of the kinds of work we're going to be doing as sort of DevOps specialists, development operations specialists, we might want to run 3 separate computers on one physical hardware, right? So suppose you wanted to run 2 computers, 2 operating systems on one hardware. Why would you want to do that? Well, there's a number of reasons. Number one, hardware these days is so powerful, like the laptop in front of me, I might be using 3 or 4% of its capabilities at any one time because it's so strong, right? And everybody's computer, like the cheapest computer you can buy at Best Buy these days, is very strong. It has 4 cores in the CPU and it has like 2 terabytes of RAM and so on. So I might want to run other activities on my computer. I might be working for a company which does software development, so I need to quickly configure different computers for different developers. Maybe Mary needs a Macintosh machine with a certain version of database, and Steve needs a Linux machine with certain version of MQ series, and Susan needs another configuration for her program. So virtual machines let us quickly configure different operating systems to run on the same computer hardware. So a virtual machine is an application program just like Word. And it sets up an entire operating system inside that program. And I can have several virtual machines on one physical hardware. And that's going to be a major topic of discussion in our course. We're going to spend a lot of time talking about this. Now, a couple of things to bear in mind is that a computer takes resource from the hardware. So if we think here that we have a certain amount of RAM memory and a certain amount of hard drive space and a certain amount of CPU capacity, if I run 3 virtual machines on this same hardware, so we'll call it VM1, VM2, VM3, this is just software. It is just a program, just like Microsoft Word is a program. So the fact that I'm running a virtual machine does not magically increase my amount of hardware resource. So if I run too many virtual machines on one host, and this is called a physical host, by the way, if I run too many virtual machines, I'm going to run out, it'll just crash, right? There won't be enough CPU, there won't be enough memory, there won't be enough hard drive space, there won't be enough hardware resources to run too many virtual machines. So one of the things this question, and I'm going to scan this, right? I'm going to scan this and put it in your PowerPoint in a few minutes. By the way, everything I'm telling you about now is going to be on your final exam. So when the final exam comes and you say, Peter, what are going to be the questions on the final exam? My answer is going to be, well, I was talking about that since week 1. If you don't know it by now, it's probably too late. So now would probably be a good time to start taking good detailed notes. So with the basis of this discussion that we just had, right, with the basis, and by the way, you should be taking the same kind of notes that I'm taking, right? It should not be below your social class to actually take out a piece of paper and a pen and write things down, because you remember things much more deeply when you draw pictures of them than if you just sort of sit there. Maybe you're checking your phone, maybe you're surfing your Facebook, you're watching some YouTube videos, and in the background somewhere you hear my voice going, and you think, not a problem, because the day before the exam, I'll just memorize all this stuff. No, if that's your plan, that's not a good plan. I'm telling you, that's a plan for failing, not succeeding. So anyway, with the basis of this discussion we just had, let's go back. That's going to be an exact question from your final, by the way. You can run any versions of Windows in any virtual machine. And in fact, more generally, you can run any operating system in any virtual machine, right? So here on one physical hardware, on actually one computer, I could run Macintosh there, and Linux, and Windows 8, and Windows 2012 Server, and subject only to the limitation of how much RAM, memory, and CPU and hard drive space. Subject only to physical resources. I can run as many operating systems as I want, because each virtual machine is like a little operating system inside the big operating system. It's like girls in the class, ladies, when you were a little girl, you played with doll houses. So you sat in your parents in your house, your home, and you were in this big house. And then within this big house, you made a little smaller house, which is a doll house. So that's what a virtual machine is. It's like a little doll house inside the bigger house. The versions of Windows must be no. So obviously you can understand that that would be nonsensical, right? B would be a totally nonsense answer, because it can be anything. It can be Mac, Linux. It can be not Windows at all. The versions of Windows must be the same. Again, nonsense. And each virtual machine consumes resources from the host, because I have all these little application programs, which are virtual machines, but they're living on the same computer. See, they're living on the same physical computer right there. And each virtual machine can give me a different operating system environment, but they're still sharing the same CPU, RAM, internet bandwidth, hard drive space, and other resources. All right, very good. So that student did pretty good for that question. Oh, I think the way I did this, I said it's all or nothing. For the purpose of this practice quiz, I said that unless you got the exact thing perfect, it wouldn't give you any marks. Don't worry, I'm a nice guy. For the final exam, I will make it so you'll get partial credit for all of your questions. But again, remember what I said. If you're in class, if your attendance is strong, you'll be okay. If you're having too many absences, well, you're not going to be okay. But it's early in the course. We still have time. So let's think about happy outcomes now. What is the command terminal in Windows or Mac? So that's something else you're going to become extremely familiar with. CMD is the command terminal for Windows, and Mac it's terminal. I have a Mac laptop. My wife's actually using it right now for her own stuff, but next class I'll bring the Mac in and demonstrate. And we can also have PowerShell. So PowerShell is the new preferred way of doing Windows system administration. And you can actually, there's a programming language behind this as well. One of your assignments will be to create some program applications, some system admin applications using PowerShell. So a terminal is a command line front end. It displays, yeah, well, more generally, sorry if I'm pronouncing anybody's name incorrectly, Sehaj, more generally, you can type commands in, right? So a command terminal is a window, sure, it displays and it allows you to type commands in. So here in PowerShell, for example, I could type PS to get my process table, and it would send my process table back out to the terminal. So that's something you're going to become very familiar with, because one of our goals now here is to learn how to do system administration. So system administration means to control right? So if we go back to our paper here, now up till now, I've said a bunch of stuff. I said that we create user accounts. We, meaning the Windows system administrators, the people who are doing all this stuff, right? So in this course, we're going to learn how to be Windows system administrators. That's going to be our learning paradigm for this course. What's wrong with that cable? What's that doing? And we often call it sysadmins, I guess, because it sounds cooler. So a system administrator is somebody who has the skills and knows how to use the tools to do all of this stuff. So to create user accounts, to create groups, to create policy documents, right, to work with the Windows registry, and to work with the other databases inside Windows that do all of this stuff, to work with Active Directory. That's the directory inside Windows that manages all this stuff. So system administrator is somebody who works with all of these skills. And the command terminal is one of the tools we use to do that. There's others, but command terminal is one of the ways that we're going to write PowerShell scripts to create users and accounts and policy documents and group documents. Yeah, so that would be a pretty good answer. Terminal is a window that allows you to enter commands and receive output from the system. Comparing TCP to OSI. Now, some of you might have had exposure to networking before, so we're going to learn about TCP IP networking. Why? Well, it's pretty important because TCP IP, you might be familiar, is the networking that runs the internet. So your email and your HTTP web browsers and all that stuff is all TCP IP. And of course, TCP IP is built into Windows, also Linux. So it's a very important thing to know about. So let's talk about that. Let's add that to our map here. Transmission control protocol, internet protocol. TCP is the box that you put things in, right? So imagine I wanted to send a package to my daughter or something over there in university. So I could put it in this box, and then I could write the address there and drop it in the mail. So that box is like TCP, Transmission Control Protocol Frame. It's where you store the data in, and then you put it in the post office, or you send it with FedEx or UPS or something. So that's the IP, that's the Internet Traffic Routing Protocol. So that's stuff we're going to be seeing about. I'll just leave a little note to remind us. Because I also teach Cisco router configuration and networking, so I have tons of stuff to share with you on that. All right, and I'm not going to go through these in detail because I want to move ahead, except to say that these are all, well, OSI is Open System Interconnect. That is the theoretical model. That's the academic model of networking, and TCP/IP is the implementation of how it works. Right, so the physical layer is what defines the wired or wireless connection good. Allows a device to access. Yeah, so anyway, I'm not going to spend time on this right now because that'll be a future class. But that's the kind of question you're going to get on the final, right? So make a note on it. Right, you can copy and paste from your own test into a Word document or something. I will also make a class journal. After the break, we'll start making a Google Docs class journal. So my screen keeps flickering in and out, but I guess my meeting is still okay. Guys, if at any point, you stop hearing me or something, the mic goes out or screen goes out or something, or any problem with the meeting, just type here in the chat box and let me know and I'll fix it. Because I don't know what you're seeing, right? Maybe you're not hearing me or something and I don't know that, but let me know, then we'll go in there and fix it. In terms of doing file and directory management, so once again, here's other things related to the file system. And we talked and we said that one of the core concepts of an operating system of any kind is that we have a file system. And the file system is something which is managed by the operating system. It's the hard drive where you, oh yeah, right there, file system. So files are a collection of bits ultimately, which is created by your application programs. And that's how you store your data. And then the mechanical details of how you go between your application programs and your stored data is something else managed by the operating system. So these are just ways of creating, deleting, and managing and otherwise manipulating files and directories. You will be doing an exercise in PowerShell to create some automation for this. Describe the basic element of data in TCP/IP. It's the TCP packet. Very good. It's great that the student knows that. So maybe you guys have already had some previous training on networking. And here is something which is not really in our course outline, but I think it's important for people to know about: history and culture of IT. So that's Claude Shannon, who formulated a mathematical theory called information systems or information theory. You can go and read about it on Wikipedia. His equation is the basis of the internet and also cell phones, right? So that was a very major development in terms of getting the world to where we are right now. Bardeen, Walter Brattain, and William Shockley, they invented the transistor. Actually, it's very interesting. These guys all worked for Bell Labs, and it was a company in California, right in the 1960s, which invented and installed the telephone system in the United States and Canada. But anyway, one day on a Friday afternoon, Bardeen and Bertain were sitting in the cafeteria at work talking, and Shockley, he was not a very social guy. He was sort of a loner, didn't have too many friends, but he just happened to be sitting at another table, and he overheard these two talking. Now, they were talking about their idea for the transistor, and Shockley had also been fidgeting around with the idea, but he was kind of a lazy guy. He hadn't really written anything down. So when he heard these guys talking, he got scared because he thought, oh, they're going to publish their paper before I publish mine. So it was Friday afternoon. So he told the manager, oh, boss, I'm sick. I just don't feel too good. I have to go home. So boss said, well, okay, go home and sleep. Hope you feel better on Monday. So Shockley went home and he spent the entire weekend writing his paper about the transistor. But actually, if Bardeen and Bertain would have kept their mouths shut, they probably would have gotten credited as the inventor. Shockley is actually on the record as having been the inventor, and he sort of did in a sense, but Bardeen and Bertain were a bit further ahead. So the bottom line, if you ever come up with a good idea, don't talk about it too openly because you don't want other people to steal your ideas. Anyway, the transistor is the basis of microchips, which are the basis of CPU and computer memory. Well, it's kind of an important thing to know about. Anyway, I'll leave that to you to go and research that by yourself if you think it's curious. But I don't know. I thought that was interesting when I read about that. All right, let's go back and finish this. Father of digital logic is George Boole. That's why even today we talk about Boolean logic, and we talk about how computer programs ultimately are based on Boolean logic. So now here's the idea of big data, which we're not really going to get too much into in this course. But in the old days, traditionally, data was based on SQL and relational databases, Cod's laws, and that counted on having a primary key. And now that we have a greater variety of data coming in faster with a greater velocity, and we're not sure of the veracity or truthfulness of it, right? That's why they talk about the 3 V's for big data: velocity, veracity, and variety. We do something called big data. Not relevant to this course, but you're here at college to become generally well-educated people, so I want to give you some background about how the world works. Anyway, that's our attendance quiz. And on my first class, I think I had virtually everybody here, so that was pretty good. All right, it's 9 o'clock. Let's take a break till 9:15. When we come back, we're going to go over the course outline, and we're going to continue to build up our map of all of the concepts of Windows Server administration. All right, guys, we're now on break. Resume at 9:15. All right, folks, it is 9:15. Let's get back to work. So the next thing I'd like to do now is make a Google Docs class journal, because we're going to be encountering many, many different concepts in this course. And after a while, it could get to be overwhelming. But if we're careful and if we organize our knowledge properly, then I think we'll be able to stay on top of it. So we're just going to make a journal, and I'm just going to note things as we go through them. I mean, you should be doing this by yourself anyway. It's a very good success strategy for any course to just sort of journal, write down, and reflect on all the things you're learning. And that'll accelerate and amplify your brain and your imagination putting the concepts together. However, I'm going to demonstrate how to do that for you. So pay attention to me now. All right, so let's go over to Google and make a doc, and then we'll link it into your Moodle page, right? Your course Moodle page. All right, we're doing good. All right, to begin with, let's put a link into your Moodle page so you can find this. All right, so we'll say whoever is the link can view. Anybody with the link is a viewer. Good. All right, great. All right, so let's go and start adding some stuff in there now. So day 1, September 10. Right, so we had a concepts review quiz. And we talked about the idea of what an operating system is, what does it mean to be a system administrator, and how do virtual machines work. And I'm going to put the scanned paper, right? So these papers that I wrote out before, I'm going to scan them. I'm not going to take time during class. Maybe during the break, I'll scan them and I'll put them right here. So that's how you're going to find them. Talked about what an operating system is, what it does, and what a virtual machine is. All right, so now let's go and review the course outline. That's our next activity here. Let me check back to the meeting to make sure we're all okay. Let's check that if I have any questions or comments to address, not yet. All right, good. So let's go to course outline, which you can get to at any point from your Moodle page. All right, guys, this is very important. I will try as much as possible to remember to announce our upcoming tests and assignments, but it's your responsibility, right? You're not babies, you're adults who can kind of function by yourself in the world. So you're responsible for keeping track of this stuff, right? So don't kind of lose track of this and then complain later nobody told you we had a test or something. So actually let's do it this way. So anyway, here's our weekly learning plan, and then we're going to look at our course outline. So today, week one, we're going to talk about VMware Workstation. VMware is one way to do a virtual machine, by the way. How to create and manage virtual machines, and also introduction to Windows Server. Next week, we'll have a little skills assessment. I'm not totally sure how I'm going to do that yet. I might do that in the form of a little in-class activity. I'll ask everybody to work on and then send it to me in Moodle as a hand in write. So let's put an announcement there so everybody remembers that. I mean, your skills assessment could also be in the form of a class marker quiz. It can be pretty much whatever I want it to be. So just be in class and we'll take care of that. Okay, so it's going to be September 17th. So this could be based on anything we studied in week 1. It could be some sort of an activity on the computer, which you'll then hand in. It could be a class marker quiz. Maybe I'll think of something else. All right, let's go back to our learning plan. So week 3, we're going to see about how to install Windows Server. Now, to get this going, I'm going to demonstrate, and you can follow along if you like. We're going, well, actually, I think we're going to be back to in class, right? Isn't it? I think for this class, only today is online. I think starting from next week, we're going to be in class. Anyway, we'll see. The office sometimes changes that around. But if we're in class, we're going to be using things like VMware to install Windows Server. And then week 4, we're going to configure our Windows Server environment. Week 5, we're going to learn about something called Active Directory and account management. Active Directory is the thing that we saw on that diagram we made at the beginning, which manages your users, groups, policies, and accounts. Week 6, configuring, managing, and troubleshooting resource access. So things like file systems or printers. If you're having a problem, it's probably because the policies or the groups weren't set up correctly. So we'll see all of that amounts to working with Active Directory, by the way. Week 7, configuring external resources such as file system and printing. Week 8, configuring and managing data storage. Week 9, oh, by the way, we're going to have a test on week 5. So you see that, pay attention. Week 5, which is October 7th, I think. You can check the chart. We'll announce it, but it's coming up 1 month from now. You'll have test 1 worth 20%. And then we'll have another skills assessment on week 8. Week 9, managing networking, so internet connectivity. Then we'll have a test there. Good morning, Shagunpreet Kaur. How are you? And then week 10, configuring remote access services. So the concept there is in Windows networking, you can access, let's say you have 2 computers, you can access into one computer using a remote access terminal. So we'll see about that. Is the test online or in person? Well, Shagunpreet, the office is doing this thing about hybrid, right? So we have hybrid. So I have to figure that out. I mean, all of this stuff is so confusing. I'm not really sure. I will try to make it in person if I can. I'll do my best because I know you prefer to have in-person tests. You can ask me or something if you have a question, and then I can say, well, it's your test. You figure it out. I'm not going to tell you. But we'll figure that out somehow. Anyway, then week 9, we have another test worth 20%. Oh yeah, we already said that. Week 11, securing. Week 12, learning how to use some monitoring tools. Week 13, another skills assessment. And then week 14, we have virtualization and hypervisors again. So anyway, that is your learning plan. That's your textbook. If you want, it's a pretty good textbook. You can go and buy it. And we're also going to be spending some time learning how to use VMware. So, and there's also a concept now called professionalism. So professionalism, which is 15% of your grade, is things like attendance, right? Participation in class. So if I ask you a question and you can sort of give some sort of a reasonable answer, that would count towards professionalism. So that's a fair amount, right? That could be the difference between like a C+ and an A or something like that. So anyway, if you have any questions about your grading or about the learning plan, let me know. Now, the next thing we're going to do here is look at the course outline. Let's review the course outline. Which is down here. Oh, another thing I meant to put here, I guess I forgot. I'm going to go and add it in now. Yeah, so this document is academic weeks, and that's going to be true for all of your other classes, not just this one. So if you're wondering, well, what is week 6? Like that's October 10th, right? So it says, well, the test is going to be week 6. Okay, what is week 6? It's going to be our class, which is on the week of October 10th to October 16th. So anyway, just keep that handy. Now let's go and look at our course outline. So an operating system, as we discussed, is an organized collection of programs and data designed to manage the resources, the hardware, as well as the users of a computer system, and provide a platform on which to do work using applications. The resource is designed to build this course is designed to build a foundation in server administration skills. We're going to cover all of the key Windows Server 2016 features, such as Active Directory. The student will learn how to choose the right server edition for your company's needs and how to install, configure, customize, manage, and fix problems with your server. Oh, I see. So you guys have had a background in Cisco. So you've had a course in networking, great. And you've also had IT essentials, good. So we're going to learn to create virtual machines using VMware Workstation. And if you've not seen, you might have seen VMware in your IT Essentials course. If you've not seen it, this is what it looks like. Why is it taking so long to run, to load? There is 2 versions, right? 2 flavors of VMware Workstation. There is VMware Workstation, which is the simple one. And there is also Oh, cool. Update. There is also VMware Workstation Pro, which is the one I have. Pro allows you to make ISO images, and Workstation allows you to play ISO images, right? So we talked about how VMware, how a virtual machine is like a little sort of operating system within a parent operating system. So using a tool such as VMware Workstation, which you're seeing here, or the other way we can do it, which is a free software, which is Oracle OpenBox. Right, so we're going to learn to use both these products. Oh, VirtualBox, sorry, not, it used to be OpenBox because it was open source. Now it's called VirtualBox. So anyway, this is another product that allows you to create an image of another operating system, of a guest operating system, and then play that image in the VMware player, in effect, running another operating system within your parent operating system. See, I have version 16 Pro. I bought this myself because I teach at a number of different colleges and I can get it from colleges I teach at, but I'm not really comfortable to use something I got from Seneca here at Piers or something. So just to sort of not have any sense that I'm using somebody else's intellectual property, I just bought my own copy to get over and done with it. Anyway, I'm going to be using this and I'm going to be demonstrating how to make ISO images. And I think you guys, there's a 30-day trial. So for our labs, I'll get everybody to download the 30-day trial and you can make for example, an image for Windows Server. And then that Windows Server image, that's going to be what we use to do our Windows Server work on. Anyway, that's what VMware looks like. Just wanted to show you that. Just going to leave this open because it's updating my stuff here. And another thing we're going to work with is Oracle OpenBox, a VirtualBox, which does the same kinds of things. It does it a bit differently. It's a good idea for you to be familiar with both of them. Where did I put my course? Oh, there we go. There it is. So anyway, you're going to learn to work with that. Course outcome 2, prepare, install Windows Server 2016. Plan for Windows Server 2016 Active Directory and system security. Identify various types of file systems and their components and how we do disk management. So the concept there is there's different file systems in the world. File systems have, well, it's like everything else, right? It has advantages and disadvantages with different file systems. We'll see the ones used by Windows, Linux, and Macintosh. Describe and configure local data storage mechanisms, install and manage printers, describe networking configuration for your Windows Server, configure and troubleshoot remote access services, create and administer various types of domain user accounts and domain group accounts, monitor a server and a network for troubleshooting, understand and configure virtualization software, right? So virtualization gets back to either VMware or Oracle VirtualBox. Right, so there's the stuff we're doing that basically maps to our weekly course learning plan, which I made and I already showed you. And the passing mark here is a C. So just show up at class and participate and do all the stuff I tell you to do. Your class, your mark will probably be quite strong, like a B+ or something. Anyway, that's the course outline and that's the evaluation timetable. So now we've covered off on that. Let's see how we're doing. Okay, it is 9:40 and we're going till noon today. Let's take another little break till 10 o'clock. When we come back, we will begin lecture on how Windows Server works and how VMware works. So we're now on break until 10 o'clock. All right, folks, let's pick it up again. It is 10 o'clock. We're going till noon. I'll probably end the class a couple of minutes early because some students may have another class to get to or something, right? So I think the pattern we will probably do is end class at like 11:45 or something. So you have time to eat a little bite of a sandwich and get to your next class. And we'll probably take another break sometime, maybe around like 10:50 or something. We'll take another break. But anyway, let's get back to work now. So what we've done so far is introduce the concept of Windows Server Administration. We talked a little bit about what an operating system is and what some of the reasons might be why we would want to have this skill called administration. So I'm going to call up some next material now. So we have some good PowerPoints and other things to work on. Just give me 1 second to pull those out of my archive. All right, guys, we've got a couple of good PowerPoints for our course. Here's one of them. I'm going to upload this to your Google Classroom page at the end because we might make some changes to it. But for anyway, right now we're going to go and do some lecture based on this. If you have any questions, let me know, and we're going to get started. And I'll also put, if I make any notes like the ones I made at the beginning, I'll scan them and put them in here as well. So remembering that diagram we drew at the beginning and talking about how hardware is controlled by the operating system, here are the things that are going on in any operating system. We have the hardware at the very lowest level. Next week, we'll talk about the idea of the BIOS chip, which is the basic input-output service chip. And some of you might have wondered at some point how it can happen when you turn on your computer and it goes from being totally turned off and there's not much happening with it. Then you turn it on and it somehow loads up the operating system. How does that happen exactly? Because there is a little IC chip, right? A little integrated circuit chip on the motherboard called the BIOS chip. And the BIOS chip tells your motherboard to go to a certain location on the hard drive, on sector 0 of the hard drive, and load up the operating system. And then we're going to see some of these other concepts later, like the kernel and so on. So this PowerPoint talks about Sorry, for some reason my screen is cutting out periodically. I just have to wait for it to come back. I don't know why it's doing that. It's irritating. Yeah. So we talk about sharing hardware among users, allowing users to share data, and preventing users from interfering with one another. Those are traditionally some of the core things that operating systems have done. Upon successful completion of the course, right, we're not going to read through this again. This is from your course outline. Now, in a previous class, I used a quizzing tool, and we did some class review, right? So these are some of the things, concepts we'll talk about later. Not going to get into this too much right now, but I will note here, Active Directory is one of the core concepts we're going to be working with. So let's go and put that on our Visio diagram. So the Active Directory, as we saw before, maintains a number of core data structures that run the Windows operating system. The key ones we're going to be working with in our labs are user accounts. So every time a user logs into the system, they get some portion of the hard drive to use, and right, they can create encrypted files and so on. So their password is there. So we have a user account manager. We have policy documents. They're maintained in Active Directory. I know you don't know what these terms mean yet, but we're just introducing them right now. And now one of the things we do with our users is put them into groups, because if we had to individually manage many different users, that would be sort of tiring. So we create these things called user groups, and we put many different users, like all the users who work in the marketing department, for example, we put them in the marketing group. So users are put into groups, and then we set up policy documents for each group, and the policy documents control what the users in that group are allowed to do or what they're denied from doing. Right, so user accounts go into groups, and groups are set with policy documents. All right, let's carry on now. So some of the concepts we'll be introducing here are heuristics. A heuristic is a thinking rule, and one of our heuristics in IT is follow the money. In fact, we talk about that in business in general. So if you're thinking about where you should be looking when it's the time to go out and apply for a job, one of my own personal experiences is if you can find an area of business or of work where they're spending a lot of money, that is probably a good place to go and apply to a job, because if there's a lot of money, then they're probably going to have more money to pay you. And system administration is a very in-demand skill. So that's why I'm encouraging you, and I hope that you take this course seriously and you pay attention to the things I'm telling you, because this can lead to very well-paying work. Now, what are the jobs we do as system administrators? Well, security is a big one, and you probably heard about things like, hackers getting into banks and so on and stealing data and stealing user information. Well, the system administrator is the lady or the guy who's in charge of keeping that from happening. And we also protect the integrity of the system. So we talk about our processing resources and our storage resources and our data resources and all the other things that the operating system manages on the computer. Now, in terms of Windows networking, which is what we're talking about here, we have a concept of a domain controller. So that's another concept I think we should go and add to our wall chart over here, right? Our roadmap, the idea of the domain controller. And we're going to find out that the Active Directory defines a domain. We're going to see next week what a domain is. Now, domain, because you've had a course in Cisco, you might be thinking about a domain in terms of TCP/IP networking, but domain here in Windows Server Administration has a larger meaning, which is all the computers connected to one domain controller and all the user accounts and all the policy documents, everything managed by the Active Directory is within a domain. So we're going to look at domain controller and see how to set one up under VMware. Check back to see if I have any comments so far. All right, not yet. So the Active Directory is in charge of maintaining the user directory. It also controls the permissions of what users can do on the network. And I understand that right now I'm just dumping a bunch of information onto you, and a lot of the stuff you're confused by. Well, it's like swimming, right? If you want to learn how to swim, you just have to jump in the water at some point. All of this stuff will start to make sense by about week 3 or week 4. But until then, we just have to start introducing a bunch of new concepts, and you just have to have patience as well as mental fortitude to keep pushing yourself through till you've learned enough stuff to achieve critical ignition mass, and then the connection of understanding is going to start to happen. So here's another diagram which shows how the Active Directory relates users to resources. The system administrator's job includes things like running backups, running and updating the antivirus software, updating application software, and so on. So here, we have a user registry, which is where our groups are. We have policy documents, and we have something called access control lists, which controls access to hardware and file directories. You can make groups as containers for resources as well as users. Policies are statements of things that users are allowed or denied from doing. If we have many computers on the TCP/IP network and they all have one Active Directory as their authoritative domain, then they are, what did I say here? Then they are the same user. Yeah, I have to clarify that statement. We'll get into that. The statement was a little bit messy. And Active Directory relates users to resources. Yep. So anyway, there's other concepts here we're going to get into in Active Directory, which is forests and trees. You can make a tree of Active Directory domains sharing the same DNS and namespace. And we have to understand a bunch more stuff before we'll totally get to understanding what that means. Ultimately, you have only two things on the computer, right? You have software and hardware. The software can be operating systems and application programs. And the hardware, there's many different kinds. One of the big things we care about for networking is the network interface adapter. And then we have this concept of BIOS, basic input output service, which is like a little operating system embedded on one microchip. And the purpose of that is when the motherboard powers up, the computer program burned into that BIOS chip reaches its hand out to sector 0 of the hard drive, grabs the operating system, and starts loading it up into the CPU and the RAM memory. Right, so that's what a BIOS chip would look like, for example. It's a little microchip, and it's a computer program. And if you ever see an open computer, like an old computer that's the lid is off it or something, you can take a look at the motherboard, and you'll see the BIOS chip will look something like that. And network interface adapter, you're probably familiar, is like another little microchip, or it could be a USB stick or something. It's what provides the radio transceiver for your motherboard to send and receive Wi-Fi signals. See, so those could be examples of network interface adapters. That's for the older hardwired stuff, RJ45, you plug into a cable, and these days a lot of them are wireless, so they're radio receivers. So virtualization, that's one of the things we said we wanted to talk about today. We can connect via Telnet, remote desktop connections. We can use our laptop. as a screen keyboard to control another server as if we were sitting in front of it. So that's one example of virtualization. Or virtualization can also mean running a guest operating system inside a parent operating system. Right, so two meanings of virtualization. Controlling a remote computer from a local computer. Or running a guest operating system, a child operating system inside a parent operating system. And this is something we'll cover in another PowerPoint, but I'll just make another note of it here because it's quite important. There are two types of hypervisors. Type 1 and type 2. So a type 1 hypervisor is what's called a bare metal hypervisor. So a hypervisor is a virtual machine, right? A hypervisor is the engine of a virtual machine. It's the operating system that controls the hardware. So in this case, we don't need a parent operating system. We do not run the hypervisor virtual machine inside a parent or container operating system. We run it directly on the metal, which is why it's called bare metal. Now, the other way we can go here, which we're going to see both of these, is a type 2 hypervisor. And a type 2 hypervisor lives, it operates, it exists, it runs as an application inside a parent operating system, inside a host operating system. So one factor of a type 2 hypervisor is the parent operating system is using some resource, so we have less resource available for our VM. Over here, a bare metal hypervisor. Now, here's one question I'm thinking about myself. I have not come up with a good answer to this myself, so I'll just share the question with you, and maybe during this course, we'll figure it out together. What's the difference? Maybe I'll make this a final exam question so I can see your thoughts about it. Or maybe this will be your skills activity next week. I will ask you to give your answer to this question and hand it in. What is the difference between a type 1 hypervisor and an operating system. Because as far as I can tell, an operating system like Linux or Windows is a type 1 bare metal hypervisor. It lives on the hardware and it does all the functions of an operating system. Maybe there's something else I haven't come up with yet, but I think they're the same thing myself. So a hypervisor is a program that delivers the same experience of using a real physical computer. It exists as a software program running on a host. And in fact, inside the Windows operating system, we have something called the hypervisor, which is the layer of the operating system between the application program and the hardware. And they started, Windows started putting hypervisors in Windows, I think, starting in 2011, because I don't know if you remember, maybe you were a little bit too young at the time to know what was going on, but there was a lot of problems with computer viruses in 2010 and 2011. So one of the things Microsoft came up with is to put this intermediation layer, right? So in Windows operating system, there's an intermediation layer. There's a barrier, right? There's a break. There's there's a barrier. Between the application software layer and the hardware layer. This is called the HAL, or hardware abstraction layer. Now, the way this works is application programs must make API calls. Those are programming method calls. Application programs must make requests to the HAL to access the hardware. Application programs are not allowed to access the hardware directly. They must go through this HAL layer, which is this hypervisor, in effect, built inside of Windows. Okay, oh, actually, yeah, I think this was something from before, right? I remember talking about this before. So it's another description of type 1 and type 2. So type 1 is bare metal, does not need or use a host, lives directly, right? So it lives, it connects, it operates directly on the hardware. We're not paying the resource cost of running a host operating system. Type 2 guest hypervisor, VMware is one example, runs as an application program. And I want to show it to you. I just have to finish installing it. I'm having problems installing my update. Maybe during the break, I'll get that going. Then I'll show you how VMware works. So VMware runs as an application program inside a host operating system, Windows in my case, just like you can play an MP3 file inside a media player. Advantages: simpler to install, cheaper, right? Requires less technical skill to get it tuned and working. Hypervisor is the basis of VMware. Okay, we talked about that. Oh yeah, again, so once again, this is something that in previous terms I had said the same thing. I was just repeating it here. So here's some examples of different hypervisors that we're going to see and study about. Type 1 and type 2 hypervisor uses. We're going to have a lecture on hypervisors. We're going to come back to this. A word of caution, the word domain has two completely separate meanings, which you'll understand based on context. Domain can be used in the TCP/IP Cisco router networking sense, in which a domain is a collection of computers that live on one subnet, or a domain in the sense we'll be using it here in this course of an Active Directory domain. In general, our Active Directories may be on different subnets, but an Active Directory, as we're going to see, is the authoritative source of information to tell a Windows network how to run. It's the source of authentication details. An Active Directory instance is a domain controller. Active Directory trust domain is also called an Active Directory schema, which in practice, when you logged onto your computer this morning, you typed your username and user password. Those are called your user credentials. That is your user account within the trust domain. Even if your computer is just one single standalone Windows machine, you're not part of an Active Directory domain. Well, that's how Windows does things. That's how they create trust domains to log you onto their operating system. About file systems, a file system is a container for files, and we're going to do a lab on file systems using PowerShell, so we'll get more into that at that point. An operating system in the simplest context is a kernel plus device drivers, right? So we have the kernel, which is the core of the operating system, and we have device drivers, which are sort of this cloud of programs on the outer edge of the operating system. And device drivers are what connect hardware, such as keyboard, screen, mouse, printer. They allow external peripheral devices to interact with the operating system. The kernel is a box, it's a bunch, it's a collection of APIs, little C programs that deliver the requirements of the operating system. Everything the operating system does falls into two containers, inputs and outputs. So user accounts, applications live under the authority of a user account. So when you installed Word or Chrome web browser on your laptop, it got installed under your user account because you were the one logged in at the time. What exactly are user accounts? They are records in the Active Directory database. What must those records contain? Identity management and security credentials. Right, so over here in outputs, these things are the jobs that the Active Directory does. It manages the processes of the process allocation table. So in Windows, if you press Control-Alt-Delete and go to Task Manager, all of these things are processes. And in fact, one of the things I was trying to do during the break and I couldn't find it is that to update my VMware, it's telling me that I have to end the process, which is called oh, actually, maybe it did end and I can install it now because I couldn't get this far before. Enhanced keyboard driver. Why not? Sure. Yeah, so anyway, what it was complaining about before, it did not let me go this far. It was saying that I had to end the VMware process. And I thought I did it, but maybe it took a few minutes before it completely ended. So you see over here, I have name, which is the name of process, like there's Microsoft Word, Visio, PowerPoint, and so on. And then I have how much of CPU it's running, how much of memory it's using, how much of disk IO it's using, how much of network it's using. how much of the graphical processor unit it's using, and how much power it's using. So this is the process allocation table in Windows. Each one of these lines corresponds to a running program. So anyway, that's the process allocation table. So managing access to system resources, the file system is a resource, and access to the hardware, as we've now seen, is managed through this thing called HAL, or the hardware abstraction layer, which is a hypervisor. Right? VMware is a hypervisor as well. Oracle, Oracle VirtualBox is a hypervisor, but actually inside the Windows operating system itself is a little hypervisor, which is this thing that mediates and controls access to hardware. And that is done for security to make it harder for hackers to get malware running on your computer. Okay, guys, we have about another 7 slides here. I don't know if it's just because it's the first week of school or something, but I'm a little bit not as energetic as I usually am. So let's take another break. I know it's a little bit early for our next break, but I feel the need for a break myself. So we're going till 11:45. It is now 10:35. Let's give it a break till 10:50. When we come back, we'll go for about another 50 minutes to the end of course. So it is now, we're on break until, let's make it 11 o'clock. We're on break till 11 o'clock. Whoops, audio level test. Yeah, so we'll be picking it up in 5 minutes. We said we're resuming at 11 o'clock, and then we're going to go to 11:45. So that will be the it'll be our activities for today's class. All right, folks, starting in 3 minutes. Okay, guys, we're going to start now. All right, folks, let's go. Oops, where's my meeting control? All right, we've covered quite a bit of material. Whoops, sorry, audio level check. Sorry, my mic was muted. Yeah, I was just saying we've covered quite a bit of material in our class today. So let's go and do a little knowledge lock-in. And once again, this will serve for attendance, because one of the big problems we have with online is we're not sure. People might log into the meeting, but they might not actually be here. And attendance is part of professionalism, which is 15% of your mark. So take a couple of minutes now. This is something called Kahoot, and maybe you've worked with it before. Maybe this is the first time, but I like Kahoot. I use it a lot in my stuff. So go and click on that link and let's play our little Kahoot game. And then we're going to go and finish our introduction to Windows Server. So go to this link now and do that. I'm still waiting for players. Ah, there, I have Kawal Preet and Harry. Good. All right, guys, go. What is at the center of Windows Server networking? I talked about it a couple of times. Let's see if you remembered it. Five answers so far. Ah, six answers. Seriously, I only have 8 people in the class. Well, I know who those. Oh, I have 9 people in class. Good. Sales management, not really. Enough funds, no. Networking expertise, no. Operating system, well, in a sense, I guess, maybe. Get acquainted with deep knowledge, no. Do not go for luxurious till you have 5 times the price. What this has to do with Windows Server, not really sure. But anyway, the answer we're looking for here is the Active Directory, or it could also be the domain controller. And in future classes, we're going to see the connection between Active Directory and domain controller. So one of those two answers is what I was looking for. Those are all horribly bad answers, by the way. But at least you guys are here, unlike your other classmates. Oh, Kawalpreet, winner. Yay. Haha. Jesus, I better capture this. I'm going to screenshot this because it's a lot of work, guys. I'll tell you, marking final exams is a lot of work. So usually what I just do is look at attendance, and people who have the best attendance get the best mark, and people who have no attendance fail, and people who are in between pass, but they get a bad mark. I'm not able to join, Hanpreet. Well, I'm not sure what to say because everybody else is able to join. So maybe try using Chrome browser. Use Chrome browser. It's working for everybody else. All right, next question here. Discuss the role and purpose of the Active Directory. Three answers so far. Seven people are in class. Good. Oh, 8 people. Good. The office tells me just so long as I pass at least 8 students at the end, that's good enough. That makes them happy. Ah, 9. Excellent. 10. Whoa. 11. 12, 13, 14. Taking off like gangbusters now. 15. To manage network resources, yes. To secure the network, yes. To manage permission and control, yes. So those, everything here is a good answer. That's fine. Windows Server, well, that's not really an answer. By the way, guys, I'm going to tell you something when I start marking your tests, because we have our first test on week 5, I think, right? Some students, they actually say something which they probably intended to give a good answer, but it's not complete. Like Windows Server, that's not really a complete answer, right? That's, well, what about Windows Server? Same thing here. That's an incomplete answer. If you said to manage the Windows Server, it would now be an acceptable answer. See, Windows Server administration, that's good. That's a good answer. IT is nonsense. I don't even know what IT means. It's a group problem solving method. No, it's not. Directories on the computer. Well, again, you could say that it manages directories on the computer. That could make it an okay answer. Connect the data. No. Data analysis. What the fuck? Sorry, guys. Pardon my French, ladies. What possible connection does Windows have with data analysis? Like, just spend a couple of seconds At least this student is being honest enough to say that they don't know instead of just giving some nonsense answer. It's a directory service produced. Yeah, actually, that's right. That is a very sophisticated answer. It is a directory service. Yes, that's even a bit more than we got into, but yeah, absolutely. And you can use it to connect different Windows networks together. Yeah, beautiful answer. I love that. It runs on Windows Server. Yes. It manages permissions. Yep. Respective attributes are stored. Store millions of objects. Well, you're not really telling me what it does. So I would, on a final exam, I would probably give this answer 0. Stores information. Yeah, once again, I'd probably give that answer 0 because you're not, you could say it stores information on users, groups, and resources. That would be a good answer. Enables administrators to, yeah, so admins to manage permissions. That's good. I like that. It organizes and stores files. Not really, no. It does manage the file storage of the operating system, yes, but by itself, Active Directory does not store and organize files. So that answer we would not really accept. That's not good. So secure the network. Yes, because it stores password for users and so on. So yeah, we'll accept that answer. It runs on Windows Server. That's a very weak answer. I mean, I might give, if this question was worth 20 marks on final exam, I might give 5 marks for that. It's kind of right, but it doesn't really, does it answer the question of what's the role and purpose? No, so you would not get too many marks for that answer. To maintain record, again, no, although if you said maintain records about users and resources, yes, then it would be a good answer. Active Directory is Microsoft's proprietary directory service. Yeah. But again, you're still not telling me what it does. You're telling me what it is, which is something at least, but then you would have to add to it and say it manages information about users, groups, policies, and hardware resources. Make certain information easy to find. Give access to what? Why? Separating files? No. Windows Server, what about it? Directories on computers. Again, you're not answering the question. So anyway, now let's go and talk about what we discussed at the beginning of class. So when I ask you this next week, you won't embarrass yourself quite so badly. And I'm going to put this in your class journal now so you have it. So here are all the things that Active Directory does. Everything on this page, basically, it's in charge of. So let's grab a screenshot of this and put it in your learning materials. Okay, guys, I just have to turn off screen sharing for a couple of seconds to go and dig out my password. I'll be back in a second. Don't go away. All right, guys, I got the password. I'm going to turn back on screen sharing and we'll continue now. So keep your eye on this document because I'll be putting many important notices here. Whoops. We want our documents here. We want this. Oh, Jesus, it got logged out again. Hang on. All right, so that's good for that. Let's carry on now. I think we have a couple more questions in our quiz here. All right, guys, go back to your Kahoot. I think we have one more question. Go. How do users relate to computer resources? Authorize data, identify users. Again, you're not, think about the test, which is coming up on week 5. You're not making it a complete sentence to tell me how they relate. Like, you're not really answering the question. With input and output, no, 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 no. Well, I mean, yeah, I guess that's sort of an okay answer through graphic user interface. I guess maybe at least that's starting to answer the question a little bit. Interact directly with the hardware. No, actually, because of the hardware abstraction layer, that definitely does not happen. Physical player, I have no idea what that means. Well, here you're saying resource management system, but what about it? Like, you're not saying what about the resource management system. All right, anyway, those are not particularly good answers. Gorleen is the winner. Yay. Anmol is second place. Yay. And the top place winner goes to Harry. Yay. All right, guys, let's move on. All right, let's put this away for now. We'll come back to it later. Okay, great. So we're going to spend our last little bit of time now, our last 15 or 20 minutes of class, going back to our course. Well, actually, virtual machine, I'm going to push that off a little bit till we're in the room together, because that's very much of a hands-on lab activity. But I'll at least show you a little bit about how VMware works, because I got it up and running now. So if we look at my own computer, VMware, you see here I have a network editor, because if I have multiple virtual machines running under VMware on my one physical host computer, they will connect together by TCP/IP, right? So I have a network editor. I have a workstation player, and that's freely available. And I'm going to ask every one of you to download that and put it on your own device. You can also get Workstation Pro as a 30-day trial, which you're going to use, right? There's VMware Workstation Pro. So these are some of the things we're going to do here. We're actually going to build ISO files. Now, I hear you asking, what's an ISO file exactly? Well, let's pay attention. So the way that virtual machine editors work, right? Software that works with virtual machines, the way it works is as follows. So using and working with virtual machines. Right, so the ones we'll be doing will be VMware and Oracle VirtualBox. So you have two ways in which you can work with this, right? So the two modalities of working with this, you can use the authoring or editing software, use the virtual machine sort of construction, sort of, I don't know, like editing, or use the virtual machine building, I guess we could call it, software. And what does this output? So what does this actually make? It makes something called an ISO file. Now, an ISO file in the old days, and you guys might not even remember this, maybe you've never seen it, but in the old days, we had something called CDs, and a CD was this like silvery disc, and they put music and, I don't know, software and stuff on it. So an ISO file is a file system format from CD. And the reason why that's important, in the old days when we used to install Windows or Linux, we would install them from a CD probably. Now we usually get it from a memory, you know, a USB memory stick or something. But anyway, when we work with VMware, we're going to see that it creates an ISO file. We're also going to see that we can get ISO files. For operating systems like Windows and Linux. So for example, one of the activities we're going to do we will actually install Windows Server version 2020, I think. I'm not sure of the exact version. Anyway, the exact version doesn't matter too much. We will install Windows Server, maybe like 2012 or one of the old ones or something, and practice configuring it. Okay, we've got about another 10 minutes, so bear with me. So we'll practice installing Windows Server from an ISO file. Now, where do we get that ISO file, I hear you asking? Well, Microsoft, right? Because Microsoft owns Windows, so in that case, we get it from them. And this will enable us to have a Windows Server to practice doing our server administration skills. Right, so let's see where we might go about looking for Windows Server ISO file. Bear in mind, guys, this is all stuff I'm talking about in class. So therefore, I can ask you about it next week for your in-class skills builder activity, which is worth 6% of your final mark. 6% is a lot, right? That could be the difference between C+ and B- or something. So here I'm going to go and search where to download the ISO file for Windows Server. They make it pretty easy to get that one because that's a learning version, right? Nobody uses Windows Server 2012 for anything practical anymore. Right there. Windows Eval Center, Windows Server R2. So that's where you get it. Now, what do we do with that ISO file once we've downloaded it? What do we actually do with it? We take VMware, right? So we take VMware, or we could take Oracle Box, but we take a virtual machine player, we load the ISO file into the player, and then we run it, and then it runs as an application, and then within that VMware player, we now have a Windows Server. So then we can practice doing all of our Windows Server stuff. Now, another good benefit of working with a virtual installation is when you first start working with servers, you're going to break things, right? You're going to mess them up. You're going to damage them so they don't work. And if that was a real server that people were counting on to do their work, that would be pretty bad. But if it's a virtual box, you just hit the reset button, and in 2 minutes, you'll go back to having a fresh, clean install ready to go. All right, I got about another 10 minutes here, so let's do more work now. So we use virtual machine building software like VMware Pro. And the output of that is an ISO file. Now, the other thing we can do here is we can take the ISO file we either made by ourselves or we downloaded it from some website. And run it in VMware Player. So I can take, in fact, for another one of my classes somewhere else, I do that. We have a very specific setup of a Java server environment, and it would take the students several hours to get it set up and running the right way. So I made an image of it. I burned an ISO file, and I gave them the file, and then we got the IT department at college to put VMware Player on their computers, and then they play that ISO file, and they now have my exact image they need to do their lab. All right, I'm just going to spend the next couple of minutes showing you a few things about VMware, and then we'll wrap up the class. So here is my VMware Pro, right? VMware Workstation. I have the Pro version, which means I can create ISO files. And I don't know, I think that was like $100 or something, or $120. You can get the VMware Player for free from their site. So if you want to research that, you can go to vmware.com. Yeah, that's the one I got, I think, Workstation Pro. I remember researching this and trying to figure out what the difference was between them. I think Fusion was for Mac, and Player just plays an ISO file, right? It doesn't let you make one. And Workstation Player. Oh yeah, so Fusion is for Mac. That's the difference. So anyway, I think they may have a trial of this. I'm not sure. I think for colleges and universities, we can get a trial of it for you guys to play with. If not, then I'll just demonstrate it. But if we go over here, this is the way this works. So suppose I wanted to make a new virtual machine. Right, so welcome to the new virtual machine wizard. Now here, remember that we saw before, I could go to Microsoft and I could get the ISO file for Windows. So in that case, I would do that. I would go, if that's what I wanted, if I wanted to make a Windows Server 2012, I would get that ISO file, put it on my hard drive. And I'm not going to actually do it right now because it's going to take a while. Maybe I'll demonstrate it in class. And anyway, if I selected all those things and then continued, it would produce that's it. Basically, I would make an ISO file that I could give to other people to run. So here's some of the ones I've done in the past: Windows Server 2019, Server 2019 version 2. Yeah, I actually did a couple of those with different configurations. Now, once I have that, see, here's my Windows Server. Okay, I guess I erased that file because I ran out of hard drive space. But here I can say power on this virtual machine. So it's now going, it's finding on my hard drive where I have that ISO. This host supports Intel VTX, but yeah, that's something I have to do in my BIOS. I was working on that over the break. Run virtual machine settings. Okay, so for next week, I'm going to figure out whatever that error message is and fix it. This host, meaning my computer, supports VTX. Yeah, so I have to go into my, remember we were talking about BIOS. I have to go into my BIOS and enable virtualization. Anyway, that's probably enough material for one day. It is now 11:45, so we're going to end class. So if you have like another class at noon or something, which I do have, I have that myself. So I'm going to go and eat a little bite of food, and I'm going to give you some time to take a little break. And that's about it. So next week we will carry on. We'll have our in-class activity, and that's about it. Any questions or concerns, send me an email. My contact information is in the it's in Google Classroom. Aside from that, we'll see you next week. So take care, everybody. Have a nice weekend. Take care. See you later. Bye, everybody. See you later. Take care. Thank you. See ya. Bye, everybody.